all you people are going to have to learn to negotiate on your own behalf. And that's really hard. It means that you have to know what you want. You have to be able to communicate it. And you have to be able to say no. And to say no, you have to be built on a solid foundation. You have to have options. So you got to remember that as you go through your life. It's like, if you don't have options, you can't negotiate with someone. And if you're not willing to use them, they win, period. Because if you're asking your boss for more money, say, the answer is no. Because he doesn't have any spare money lying around that he can just give to you. And lots of other people are asking. So some of that's zero-sum stuff, you know, not all of it, because often you cooperate with people and the whole pot can grow. But some of it's zero-sum. And so you better have a case made. It's like, here's how much money I should have, here's why. Here's the benefit to you that will accrue if you do it. Here's the consequences that you don't. They're actually real, they will cost you, and I will do them. It's like, then you can negotiate. And you don't do that rudely. But those arguments, you better have them in order. Like, so for example, if you're going to negotiate for a raise or a status shift, you better have your resume at hand, all polished up, and know where else you're going to look for a job, and you better be able to get one. Because otherwise you're weak, and you will not win the negotiation. And if you're too agreeable, so you're conflict avoidant, you will make less money across time. That's already been well established. And that's because you don't have teeth. Not enough. And so in the little micro contests that you're going to have every day, you're going to incrementally lose to people who are more aggressive, who have bigger teeth. And that's what happens. So don't let that happen. You place yourself so you can negotiate, because otherwise you're just a facade. And in a real battle, a facade is just torn down right away. Well, the cricket, he's supposed to be helping the puppet out, but he overslept. It's like, that's just another indication that he's not everything he could be yet. And that's really, that took me a long time to puzzle out with regards to interpreting this movie. I could not figure out, all right, I told you this, if the bug is the person who opens the hero narrative and who can guide the transformations of time and who has the same initials as Jesus Christ, it's like, and is like knighted by nature herself, why is he such an idiot? It's a very difficult thing to figure out, but the idea that the conscience isn't omniscient, even though it has that sort of, that voice of let's say, common sense, and that fits very nicely in with the Freudian idea of the superego, again, because the superego can be flawed, it can be too harsh, it cannot be properly developed. You see that often with people who are orderly. So they're high in conscientiousness. Conscientiousness fragments into industriousness and orderliness. Orderly people like willpower. They're very judgmental, and they like things to be exactly where they're supposed to be, but they're also very self-punitive. So conservatives are much more likely to be orderly, by the way. It's one of the best predictors of conservative. Low openness is the best predictor, but right after that is high orderliness. So, and it's associated with disgust sensitivity, which is really an amazing thing. We'll talk about that later. Anyways, the cricket, well, he falls down his first day on the job. He's not as conscientious a conscience as he should be. So he's feeling pretty stupid. He's got his little millionaire clothes on there, but he's really not living up to them. So he does catch up to the fox and the puppet, however, and tries to dissuade Pinocchio from going down this road. And of course the cat, well, you can see what the cat's doing there. He's got a big hammer, big mallet, and he also shows you just exactly how much of a clue he has. He's going to wallop the bug who's sitting on the fox's hat, which I think he actually does. And then the fox can't get out of his hat and has to talk through his hat, which basically is what he's doing the whole time anyways. So this I really like. So you see on the left here, the cricket is speaking inside this flower, and like I said, there's nothing accidental in these representations. So these are artists who are coming up with these compositions, and their fantasy has a structure. And so the cricket is speaking out of this flower that has, well, you could think about it as, it has a sexualized element. So you could think about that as a phallic part of it, and that part of the feminine part of it. Well, they are flowers after all. They are the sex organs of plants. And so, And that's very much the same over here, as this is the yoni and lingam. This is from Hindu cultures, and you see there's a snake wrapped around that, and so that's masculine and feminine with a snake wrapped around it, and that's a holy representation, a sacred representation, and it represents the deepest reality. That's one way of thinking about it, like chaos and order surrounded by the snake. It's exactly the same idea. And so the cricket speaks out of that. We already know that because the cricket is the conscience, and he's been awakened in part by Geppetto and the good father, and awakened in part by the good fairy and nature. And so he speaks with those voices, and he's also a manifestation of the underlying chaos itself, because nature and culture spring out of chaos. I already showed you that schematic representation. The cricket tries to make a case for why Pinocchio shouldn't go off to be a celebrity, but it's a hard case to make, because the fox is very manipulative and Pinocchio is naive, and it sounds like a good offer. And also the fox is actually quite forceful. He basically takes him by the hand. So the temptation is, and this is something else I like about the movie, you can't just say, well, the puppet gets what he deserves, because he's little and naive, and what he's facing is really malevolent, truly malevolent, and physically overpowering. And so the movie does a nice job of not minimizing the threat that's posed by this particular temptation, and that's part of what makes it art. So here we are at the big event, and Pinocchio's off to be a celebrity. And the cricket is watching. And Pinocchio basically, well, he's got some natural talent, because he's a puppet, he doesn't have strings, and he goes on stage with strings, and then he drops his strings, and the whole crowd is amazed. And the crowd should be amazed when that happens, right? You can imagine when a kid goes to school and shows some independence, that's actually people are going to notice that. His peers are going to notice that, the teachers are going to notice that. Maybe it's too much independence even, right? But it is a remarkable thing too. Like, it's so interesting, you can see marked signs of independence in children, well, right from the time they're born, basically, because what's one of the things that's really funny about infants is that, when they're crying, you always think, oh, the baby's, well, you're crying, it's baby's sad. It's like, no, a lot of the time that baby is angry. And the way that we know that is because you could do facial expression coding on infants, just like on adults, and you can tell what emotion they're expressing. And very frequently, like when the kid starts to recognize his mom explicitly, because he or she knows the smell right away, pretty much, in the sound of the voice, but visually, if someone who comes in and it isn't who the baby wants, so generally it isn't mom, the baby will start to cry. But it's not because the baby's sad, generally, it's because it's angry that mom didn't show up. And that's an early sign of will. It's like this kid wants things, and it's perfectly willing to tell you about that. And of course, a 2-year-old who's having a temper tantrum is in some sense doing the same thing. It's poorly integrated will and independence, obviously, but it certainly runs contrary to what you want. You don't want your 2-year-old having a temper tantrum in the middle of the toy store. It's extraordinarily embarrassing for you for you, but it's also embarrassing for the 2-year-old. This is one of the reasons I think that sort of thing should be carefully socialized rapidly, because it's actually humiliating for the kid, because other people don't like that, and they're very judgmental about, they won't say anything usually, but sometimes they will. But they're not happy about the fact that that's happening, and they will judge the child negatively. And so you don't want your child to be behaving in a way in public that makes other people think badly of them. It's really not good. And so part of your job as a parent is to not expose your child to that sort of experience, especially not repeatedly. It's really hard on them.